Hey, everybody. My name is Pete Ferrari, and welcome to the SuperSelf podcast series. As you know, this podcast series focuses on all things that are health and well-being, and that really spans so many facets of our lives, everything from lifestyle to nutrition to fitness to daily performance, whether that means performance in our jobs, performance on the court, performance as a parent, performance as a colleague or a friend. We really have got an all-encapsulating meaning when we talk about a higher quality of life. And our goal is to really help people find that. And so today, our inaugural episode with a guest. So anything can happen, technologically or otherwise. I decided it was really important to actually bring in a doctor. So we've got Dr. Jeff Wulfman on the call with us today. Hey, Doc.
Hey, good to be here.
Super excited to have you here. Dr. Wulfman is actually a medical doctor, but focusing also on holistic medicine, which I think is critical because you look at things like non-traditional medicine is what they would call it in this country. Things like electromagnetic pulses or acupressure or acupuncture. Actually, that's been around for 10,000 years, going back to ancient Chinese medicine. So I'm not really sure if it's non-traditional or super traditional, but you look at what's traditional in America. What's traditional in America is give you a cocktail of drugs. You're on the drugs for life, then give you another cocktail of drugs to combat the side effects from the cocktail of drugs. Well, that doesn't do anything for us. And so one of our major goals here is to try to combat that, try to remedy that, really function as the conscience out there as it relates to better health. So super excited to have Dr. Jeff on the call. He's not only incorporated holistic medicine into his practice, but also across his own life, across his family's life. And he's also on the board as a medical advisor for Centripix. Centripix offers a number of different technologies. Today, we'll probably be discussing the KLOUD Mat technology, which is PEMF technology. I am super fascinated by it. I wholly believe in it. It works. And so not only is Jaca Rare Sugar bringing you this podcast today, but the KLOUD PEMF Mat as well. So, Doc, you ready to jump in?
Yeah, sounds great, Pete. Where would you like to start?
Let's do it. Let's talk about nutrition and good health as it relates to inflammation. Because, what a lot of people may not realize is that generally day to day, when we're kind of feeling off or we're feeling a little uncomfortable, that could largely be due to inflammation in the joints, in the tissues, in the muscles. And so it's really a little known fact that nutrition has an awful lot to do with that inflammation. So I'd really welcome the opportunity to hear from you in that regard and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, thanks. I had to, when I graduated from medical school, I'm an MD, so I went, allopathic. I had probably, 2 hours of nutrition training in medical school. So everything that I had to learn came from seeking it out on my own and my own study. And I like to look at things by going back and look at history. You mentioned the long-term history of holism. It's, humans have been smart for a very long time.
Yeah.
They're not just smart now. And they knew some things. And when I started looking at nutrition, one of the key pieces was this book by Weston A. Price, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And so the Weston Price Foundation has actually been a powerful force to bring the awareness of whole foods. Like the whole foods movement really was born out of this. But he was a dentist, and in the 20s and 30s, he traveled all over the world because processed foods and sugars were just starting to come into distribution around the world. And so he traveled all over the world and looking at the Aborigines, the Polynesians, isolated groups in the mountains in Switzerland, like everywhere where there were groups of people who had not been exposed to sugars and processed foods, and then groups that had just started getting exposed to that, and then looked at the difference. And it was striking what he saw, not only in dental health, but the shape of the face. All the degenerative diseases started emerging in conjunction with sugars coming into the traditional diets.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, there's something huge there. And then I started learning more around how even in our own country, for instance, the diabetes explosion and pre-diabetes explosion and all that, down on the border of Mexico, the Pima Indians who live both above and below in the U.S. aspect and the Mexico aspect of that, the ones below that tend to retain the traditional diet that is not full of corn syrup and sugars, and the ones above it processed, the diabetes rates were like 80% in the ones that lived in the same genetic group, 80% in the ones who lived here and like 10% in the ones who lived here. Same genetic pool, but the exposure to and the consumption of the ultra-processed foods was different. So I paid attention to that. I'm like, holy smokes. And then I started looking at the literature on corn syrup consumption, sugar consumption in its various forms, and the connections with degenerative disease is just massive. And that really, really shaped my, the way I saw things. And you mentioned the inflammation part. Every chronic illness, including, quote, psychiatric illness, depression, and these kinds of things, if you arthritis, chronic fatigue, whatever, if you do sophisticated tests looking at inflammation markers, all of them have abnormal inflammation markers. They elevated, okay? Now, to me, then it's like, as a root cause person, it's like, okay, what are the contributors to that inflammation? And if you look at sugars in its various form and refined foods, so I would consider, white flour is equivalent to sugar and corn syrup and all that. If you look at inflammation like a fire, it's fuel for the fire. So, a chronic infection can be fuel for the fire. But you throw sugars and refined foods on top of that, it's like throwing newspaper or kindling on the inflammation fire. It increases the level of inflammation in the body. So when people are wanting to shift that, the sugar and ultra-processed refined food is like gasoline being poured on the inflammation fire. There's a study done. If you have a big sugar hit, drink a soda or eat something really high sugar, it alters your inflammation chemicals for up to 2 weeks after just one big hit.
Holy shit.
And people who are vulnerable know this, like who already have this inflamed and sensitive system. If they, do that, like, I had brain fog and achy and tired for like 3 days afterwards. And that's throwing gas on the inflammation fire. So it's a critical piece.
It's so fascinating that you're saying that. I had no idea, but as you're saying it, light bulbs are going off. It's just coming into focus in my daily life, things that I'm realizing. For example, sugar is contained in 80% of foods and beverages, whether we know it or not. And I know when I've had too much sugar, even inadvertently, because my joints lock up. My shoulders freeze. I've always got chronic pain in my shoulder just from being a broken down old athlete, but my shoulders literally lock up where I can't move, and I know it's attributable to sugar. And so to your point, it's the inflammation as a function of the sugar that's further locking up my joints. And that's,
you got it.
It makes perfect sense. And
it's like throwing fuel on the inflammation fire. So it goes from this level to this level by adding that into the mix.
It's insane. And, even you look at it from an inflammation standpoint, and then you look at it from an even more dire standpoint. I've got a couple of friends unfortunately who have been afflicted with cancer, various types of cancers. And these gentlemen don't know each other, but they both told me the same thing. The second thing their oncologist told them after he said, you have cancer, is completely eliminate sugar from your life because sugar feeds cancer, period. And so you look at it's to your point about root causes and how it can manifest in the body on so many levels. We've just really got to be cognizant of that. And you look at it on a macro level, I'm sure you've seen this study. There was a study done about excessive amounts of sugar on telomere length in the body. Telomere length is what is responsible for aging. So sugar has been proven clinically to shorten telomere length, which means accelerates the aging process if you eat a ton of sugar. And so, you've just got the leaps and bounds that you can make with regard to sugar and inflammation. And, from a holistic standpoint, I think it's fascinating because there are other ways you can be eliminating or reducing inflammation in the body, electromagnetic pulsing, for example. Yes. And so I'd love to hear how food and pulsing can work together in conjunction with each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. I consider us like multi-level, multi-dimensional beings. Like we have our physical, self, but we're also bioelectromagnetic. If you put some electrodes on your chest, you're going to read this. You put it on your head, you're going to read brain waves that are all in the electromagnetic spectrum. So, we're all that. We're not just chemistry, we're also physics, bioelectromagnetics. And so in my quest to find anything that can help support human thriving and vitality, I'm like, we're ignoring the bioelectromagnetic aspect of who we are. So, the things we put in our mouth and so forth are like chemistry reactions, but before chemistry is physics, like electron charge.
Sure.
And, life is voltage also. So I'm like, well, how about we go directly at that? And that took me into exploring the whole frequency-based health supports and specifically into pulsed electromagnetic fields. And that's been around for 50 plus years. In Eastern Europe, it's the standard of care to have that as part of a regimen of helping people heal. But I wasn't satisfied with the existing technology. I felt it was a little like I had a ways to go. It was kind of like, still a touch tone phone or a dial phone. It does stuff, but the outcomes and the sophistication were not strong enough until this most recent next evolution, which actually closed a 25-year development gap. There hasn't been evolution until now. For like over 20 years, the technology's been stagnant.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so the KLOUD Mat by Centropics, I was introduced to 2.5 years ago. I was optimistically skeptical.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I've seen, I used to lecture at the holistic conferences and stuff and, walk through here's the next best thing and here's the next best thing. And this is the miracle and that's the miracle. And I see them come and then go and come and go. So I vetted it very, very carefully, used it myself for 2 months before recommending it. But it truly is the next evolution of frequency-based support at the molecular level. So basically it's a mat that puts through a ultra complex. So if I had this phone, it's got all kinds of apps and can do all kinds of stuff. But when the battery gets down, it goes into low power mode and it starts shutting down non-essential programs to maintain its ability to make a phone call. Your body does the same thing voltage-wise. Like when the level of energy goes down, it's like, no, I can't deal with that toxin right now. I can't repair that tissue because I just got to do what is the basics. So you want to get this thing to full capacity, you lay it on a wireless charger, a pulsed electromagnetic field runs through it, and it raises the energy potential of the battery. Now you can tell it to do whatever you want.
Brilliant.
And it can do it. So similarly with the body, with lying on the KLOUD Mat, pulsed electromagnetic field is running through the body, raises that energy potential, and then your body decides what to do with it. So to me, it's a foundational piece. In addition to nutrition, to me, there's like the 3 foundation cores of thriving is the nutrition, how you move your body, your physical activity, and electromagnetic charge via the cloud. And the KLOUD Mat is the best in the world, period, in my opinion. In 15 minutes, only 15 minutes twice a day, you lay on it, you punch the button, it runs for 15 minutes. It provides 23 million stimulating pulses through every cell of your body. The closest next one provides 400,000. So it's 50 times more charging pulse in a 15-minute session. And I use it every day. And I'm using it with all my clients. It's like they respond twice as fast and twice as significantly to whatever herbal regimens or whatever I have them on, because now they have the charge to respond. Same thing like diet. Now you have the charge to respond to the wonderful foods that you're putting into your system. And we've got a lot of challenges, and it just,
Plenty.
The number of chemicals and electromagnetic field, all this crazy stuff our system has to tolerate. We need the ability to be resilient. And that electromagnetics is part of it, as well as not putting things in our system that feed inflammation and, like you're talking about. And I love your mission in a lot of ways. One is like because I had this frustration as a clinician when I started learning about the impact of nutrition, and I would educate people like, hey, look, drinking soda or what, this is wrecking but only a certain percent of people, even presented with that information, would actually change behavior. I mean, you're totally aware of that, right? I mean,
it sucks.
One of my friends told me, he's like, the American version of healing is, I want to stay just like I am, only feel better. And
that's an awful referendum.
Yeah. So, I realized, okay, part of this to actually shift this is to get viable, attractive alternatives into the products that people are using and consuming, because only a certain percent are going to shift. And that's just human nature right now. So
Yep.
I love that, like, this is like to get this into things that people are consuming, as well as the education piece, which is what we're doing, part of what we're doing right now.
Wow, you struck two more nerves, and one of them we'll talk about in a minute. One of the things that you said that I found really striking is about, you called it the supplementation versus treating it at a base level with the pulses, where it's impacting the entire physiology of the human body, versus supplementation. What am I taking for herbs? And I have lived that so predominantly over the past 6 months or so, as we get into the next part of the discussion surrounding sleep and nutrition. So I was having, for 6 months, I couldn't sleep. I did not know what was going on.
I can tell that, Pete, because you send me messages at 4 a.m.
That's correct, my friend. 3 a.m., 4 a.m. emails.
Like, dude,
Just
why aren't you
go to-
sleeping?
And it hurts me to send you those, but I'm wide awake and I'm cycling thoughts. It's crazy. With any luck over time, they'll come in at 6:30. It'd be great. It'd be a godsend for me. And it's such a struggle because when we were younger, right? I could be 21 years old and I could go out all night and I could sleep for an hour and then go play basketball all day, eat 3 pizzas and then go out again. I didn't sweat the sleep deprivation, but now as I'm getting older, I can't function when I don't sleep. I literally, the next day, have trouble formulating sentences cogently. I have trouble processing thoughts at a basic level. Performance completely wanes and withers. And so I looked into this. Why am I going to sleep for 2 hours, waking up for an hour, going to sleep for 2 hours, waking up for an hour, and then I'm a zombie the next day? Well, I found out through various means that it probably goes back to cortisol levels. My cortisol levels are spiking, and that's it might be partially attributable to the fact that I'm not sleeping. So I went into, to your point, supplements mode, moringa, magnesium, melatonin. Let me supplement the fact that I'm not sleeping with this crap, which is pretty much, they were advertisements. That's why I was looking at cortisol levels in the first place. But guess what? They didn't work. Double the dosage, they didn't work. So I'm just frustrated and I'm at a loss. Well, it finally hit me. The reason my cortisol levels were up and the reason I wasn't sleeping was because I wasn't eating during the day, or I was eating crap during the day. And I didn't even realize it. So, we all get busy. And when I get super, super busy, I don't eat. Well, not only do I not eat, I'm not hungry. So if I'm not hungry, I don't realize I'm not providing my body with nourishment. So when it's time to go to bed, I have an empty stomach, my cortisol levels spike, and I'm waking up all night. Or if I'm in a wicked rush and I eat a bunch of crap, same impact. So what I finally said, okay, I'm going to experiment now at a base level. Is this nutrition at a base level? The supplements are trash. It didn't work. At a base level, my body is not properly nourished. So I started making sure that I had balanced food during the day. It took about 3 or 4 days for my body to normalize and realize I was feeding it. And I started sleeping 8 hours again. It just like that. Now, for about the past 3 weeks, I've been sleeping 7.5 to 8 hours a night, where I literally had only been sleeping 2. And so you talk about supplement versus treating the base. And I bet from your standpoint with the KLOUD Mat and the PMF, the ability to find sleep through the use of treating the body at a base level with electromagnetic pulsing, that also has to have another impact.
You nailed it. And this is one of the reasons I actually got it for myself. Well, like I said, one, I was waiting for the technology to improve, which it finally did. It's actually a whole another class, PEMA, pulsed electromagnetic activation, to really set it apart. Because people go, oh, PMF, I tried that. Or
Yeah.
I did that once, or my doctor had. It's not the same. It is not the same. It's a totally different frequency set. It's the only one in the world that's ultra broadband. The others are like 2 piano keys.
Yeah.
And the KLOUD is like a 30-piece orchestra. It covers the whole spectrum. But
Cool.
I had sleep issues a little different than you. I needed tons of sleep. Like 9-10 hours.
Wow.
And if I didn't get that, I just didn't feel good. And I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like being this vulnerable. And I've done, the cold plunges, intermittent fasting,
For
and
sure.
all the supplements, and then mitochondrial support and the red lights and all that stuff. I couldn't get beyond a certain place in terms of energy levels, and I didn't like being that vulnerable. So when I added this in, the frequency-based support with the KLOUD Mat, my amount of time I slept decreased because my high sleep needs were due to, I did not have like the foundational charge to thrive.
Right.
And I was trying to, recover by sleeping tons. I sleep almost 2 hours less than I did before since I started using. Whereas for someone like you and others, it's actually, they have all these imbalances going on that are leading to disrupted and non-restorative sleep. And it helps tremendously. They did a study with it's the only company PMF company in the world that's done this, a 400-person study, University of Vienna, people all over the world who used it for 6 weeks. And just in 6 weeks of use, people who said I have sleep problems dropped by 50%.
Wow.
So it drastically improves that. And then, don't get me started on supplements. Like it's
Garbage.
it's become, so traditional medicine, the pharma is allopathy, or, like that whole paradigm. It's become green allopathy. It's a pill for an ill.
Right.
It just using natural substances versus a pharmaceutical. And there are tons of people walk around with, $500 worth of supplements in their bag, and they still feel like crap.
Yep.
And so this is part of this piece around what's the foundation? What are you doing nutritional wise? How are you moving your body? And are you fully charged electromagnetically? And so those are like core pieces. Then anything else you do on top of that is like, you can't use a power tool if the battery's at 10%. So you got to charge the power tool. And the diet piece is huge. I see this a lot. Like people will, if they're not eating in the way you're talking about, they actually go into hypoglycemia in the middle of the night, low blood sugar. Well, your body's response to that is an alarm reaction where your adrenaline pumps up because it's like, we got to make some sugar. And they wake up at, 3 a.m. or whatever. And it's like, what's going on? Well, it's because they actually had crashed. And, those refined sugar foods lead to spikes followed by crashes, right? So that can contribute to that.
That's what I would feel. That's what I would feel is it would be an alarm. I would be jerked awake and I would be wide awake and watching TV for 2 hours, or in case of you, if it's 2 a.m., I'll get up and send you an email. And so
yeah,
it's exactly what it was. And I also, the times when I inadvertently have too much sugar, right back to sleep quality again, it's exactly that. It's my body's responding to the high from conventional sugar and then the crash. And that's why, I feel fortunate that we've got an alternative like Jaca, which is naturally, it's allulose, which is a healthy sugar. It's got all the formulaic badges you would want, but it's also been clinically proven not to spike blood sugar. It's diabetic friendly. It's been clinically proven to help control appetite where you're not overeating, and then that produces problems with inflammation. So it really is the gift that keeps on giving on this road or this pathway to nutrition. And, it's interesting that you talk about combining therapies like yours with diet. I'm sure that not eating sugar figures in there prominently because it seems to be the root of all evil as it relates.
Yeah. It's just so huge, to that, like that inflammation contributor piece we were talking about. It's just a core piece. And that, modern United States wheat / gluten is another huge, gasoline poured on the inflammation fire.
For sure.
I can't, the number of people I've had with all kinds of chronic issues when they pull out refined sugars. And again, that includes all the corn syrup derivatives, that's in everything. It's not just the white crystals, it's in all these different forms. Pulling out or reducing that. And then oftentimes, not for everybody, but a significant percent, pulling out, US-based wheat and gluten, the inflammation fire just drops dramatically. Oh my God, I can think again, and I'm not so achy, and all those kinds of things. And then you add in the frequency-based support to jack up their voltage potential, and it's like those are super, super important.
Yeah, the body is really just this ecosystem, this finely tuned machine, and it's a delicate balance of mind, body, and soul, and they're so hopelessly interlinked and intertwined. If your body is hurting through inflammation because you've ingested the wrong foods, then your soul becomes hurt as a function of the body hurting. And then the mind suffers and your impact on moods. And what happens when your moods are impacted? You treat everybody in your orbit a particular way. So you think about the far-reaching implications of whether it's sugar and, to your point, refined wheats as well, and how not using some type of other non-traditional therapy, which I would espouse, of course, your technology in particular, because it's so far advanced. You think about what that will do for your spirit, and your spirit really is going to have an impact on how you conduct yourself, how your patience levels, how you're working with colleagues, how you're dealing with bosses, how you're treating your children, your significant others. It really is, it's such a hopeless balance between the three. And I think in this country, the propaganda machines have effectively gotten us away from that. We've foregone instinct, right? To your point, we've been pretty smart for a long time. We invented fire, for Christ's sakes, and the wheel. You got to be, when you didn't go to college, you didn't go to MIT, you've got to be pretty instinctive as a human being to come up with something that's that ingenious. We are instinctive people, but the media has gotten us to forget about that. When your body locks up, people aren't trying to figure out why it locked up. They're just seeing a TikTok that says, holy shit, I should eat moringa. And they go spend, to your point, $50 on moringa, and they start eating it, waiting for it to kick in. It's really tragic. It's not going away. It's only going to get worse, right? Because now social media is so pervasive.
Yeah.
But to the extent that we can get people back to just give it a second's worth of thought, you will figure it out for yourself once you abandon these false prophets and all the crap that they have to offer. And to your point, it's funny that you mention American wheat in particular. I'm sure you've seen the studies. The entire grain population in this country is sprayed with shit that is basically poison from day one. Layers and layers of poison on all grain produced in this country from day one, before it's even gone from a bud to something that's harvestable. And
including within a couple of weeks of harvest to make it easier to harvest. Just
100%. So it's nice and fresh. And that's, so it's not surprising that when somebody cuts this out of their diet, there's almost immediate results, because your body's been so impacted, magnificently impacted by the detriments of what's going on with these foods and these beverages and these fortifications and these different chemicals. We have no choice but to be behind the 8 ball from a health and well-being standpoint. And to that end, the solutions are worse than the problem sometimes, because you look at alternative sweeteners. Look at aspartame, look at sucralose, look at saccharin, look at, what else do we have out there? We've got, there's just a variety of different sweeteners.
Yeah.
They're proving to be worse than the problem, which is conventional sugar itself. I tell everybody all the time, if I didn't have Jaca, which you can eat as much of it as I want to, and it's no problem. If I didn't have Jaca, I would use regular sugar, because at least it's natural. When you're looking at these other concoctions of these chemicals like dextrose and xylitol, these are all man-made sugar, alcohols, or otherwise. And now finally it's starting to hit the mainstream media, where you're seeing the studies on erythritol, you're seeing the studies on sucralose, you're seeing the studies on aspartame, tachycardia, heart attacks, strokes, breaks apart DNA, mutates DNA, rectal bleeding, mania, dizziness, blurred vision, migraines. Listen, granted, sugar, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, hypertension, diabetes, but if you regulate your ingestion, you're better off than what you're doing with this stuff every day. It's crazy. And
Agreed.
So, again, to that end, I think you can probably testify to that better than anybody.
I touched on a lot of great stuff there, Pete. That's part of my mission too, is when people are sick and tired and fogged and achy and so forth, it impacts all aspects of life and others around them, and not being able to live their dreams and move forward with what they would truly love to do. So there's such a bigger piece to this too.
Okay, everyone. That brings to a close another episode of the SuperSelf podcast series, brought to you by Jaca Rare Sugar. Here, we are going to be helping you discover the truth for all things that surround good health and well-being. We'll be offering you statistical data, clinical trial information that has been evaluated and corroborated, so that you can see for yourself that we say what we mean and we mean what we say. Now, while the SuperSelf series is brought to you technically by Jaca Rare Sugar, I don't care if you buy the sugar. I really don't. That's not what this is about. This is about operating as the conscience across the food and beverage industry, across the health and well-being industry, which includes supplements, fitness trainers, and the like. Our goal is to provide you with the stepping stones for your own research, where you can go out and corroborate the things that we say on your own. See for yourself what it means to find a good quality of life that fits in alongside your current lifestyle or your family's lifestyle. I think it's really going to be interesting and fascinating if we take this journey together. And once again, our goal is not just to provide you with data, but to keep it interesting. I've been living a clean lifestyle for 40 years now. Been going to the gym for almost 45 years, eating clean for 40 years. And so we're going to have a ton of stories along the way about the foibles, the successes, and the failures, but we're also going to provide you with the information that you need to carry on and carry forward. Think about subscribing. We'd love it if you subscribe to us, pass this on to your friends. I think we've got a lot of edgy and interesting podcasts that are upcoming, and we certainly will look forward to any feedback that you want to provide. Until next time, cheers.